For a fractional distillation, the first thing you have to do is pack the fractionation column with steel wool. The fractionation column is the larger of the two condensers in your kit so that it will hold the steel wool. You feed the steel wool down through the top. There are dimples at the bottom that hold it in place, pushing it down with a stick or a wire. And you can use a wire to stretch it back out if necessary. When it's completely filled, you should be able to see a lot of light through it. You don't want the packing too heavy, but you also don't want it too spread out. To set up the apparatus, you start with the hot plate to set your height and an appropriate sized heating mantle, and your round bottom flask goes in the heating mantle. In this case, we're using a 100 ml flask, and at this point it's also a good idea to add your sample. Be sure you add a magnet to act as a stir bar. This determines the height of the apparatus. The first clamp on the round bottom flask must be a burette clamp, so there's equal pressure on both sides. And this is the most important clamp of the entire setup. This is the clamp that secures everything. The reason this clamp has to be so secure is because if something goes wrong and you need to have an emergency shutdown, you have to trust this clamp because you pull the hot plate out, drop the heat source, and this clamp is required to hold everything else, so it must be secure. Then when you assemble the ground glass condenser to the flask and any other joint, you have to put a little bit of grease on the outside of the piece that goes inside the second piece so that they won't fuse together. Once greased, it turns translucent, and when you twist it, you should not hear glass grinding against glass. Fractionating column goes in next. Then the distillation head. Twist, it should look translucent when you have the grease properly applied. Then the condenser column is attached to the distillation head and secured with a keck clip. On the keck clip, the larger side of the clip goes on the outside of the large piece on the glassware. But still, just to make sure that that's secure, it's a good idea to put a clamp here for extra security. The 3-finger clamp works well. This clamp should not be tight, so you don't put pressure against the joints, but you want it there for support of the condenser. The vacuum adapter goes on next. Again, secured with a keck clip. The receiver goes here. Another round bottom flask could be used as a receiver, or a graduate cylinder so the volume of the distillate can be measured. This is a water-cooled condenser. The sample will run down the center tube with water around the jacket. So the water hoses must be attached. And secured with little condenser clips so the hoses don't flip off. The water should go in the bottom and out the top so that the jacket entirely fills. So this is attached to the faucet. This end goes into the trough. It's helpful to attach a little test tube clamp to weight it down so it won't flip out of the trough. The thermometer adapter goes in the top of the distillation head. And then the thermometer is inserted, holding close to the tip of the thermometer. As you insert it, twist it as you push, and then continuing to twist until it's in the right place. The placement of the thermometer is really critical to get good temperature readings. The top of the bulb on the thermometer should be at the base of the sidearm. If it's not in the correct position, you will either be reading temperature of vapors that are not coming over, or if you're too high, you will miss the temperature of the vapors coming over. The heating mantle, even though it has a 3-prong plug, cannot be plugged directly into an outlet. That gives it full power, and that's too much, it will burn it out. It has to be plugged through a variac or a power control. So the heating mantle goes to the variac, and then the variac is plugged into the outlet. What's in your distilling pot is a mixture, even if one component is just a slight impurity. The lower boiling components, vapors, will come up first and condense and run back down. And then the lower boiling component again will come up first and condense and run back down. So you end up with separation. The lower boiling component comes over first and distills over. The higher boiling component, or the impurity, stays in the pot. As it distills, it comes up and runs over into the distillation receiver. The distillation range on the thermometer is measured from the time the first drop distills until your pot goes almost dry, or until you know there's a temperature change. Then you change receivers if you're separating two liquids and trying to purify them both. You never distill to dryness. You always leave some liquid around the magnet in the distillation. You always want to make sure that you see something bubbling around the magnet. As soon as you turn off the heat and remove the heating mantle, there will be liquid caught up in the fractionation column that will run back down. And that's just system loss. You cannot distill everything over because some does get lost in the steel wool, but you want to make sure you never distill to dryness. If you are making two collections, it's really easy to switch the receiver by dropping this down and switching to another one and then putting it back up.
Remember, use only the stir function on the hot plate. The heating source is from the mantle. When you have finished the distillation, remove the heat source from the pot using the emergency shutdown procedure shown earlier. Because the mantle will be hot, use the towel in your locker as a heat pad. Set the mantle either back on the hot plate or on a heat-resistant surface such as a ring stand. Do not set the mantle on the countertop.